All right, so today we're going to be talking about systems thinking. So this is something you may have encountered before, or you may not, but I will hopefully we'll talk through it, and you'll be able to appreciate some of the reasons why it's a really important component of what we do in the pharmacy and when it comes to safety. So the objectives are laid out here. We're going to be talking about wicked problems, which are a special type of problem that is very difficult to deal with. We're going to talk about what systems thinking is and how it applies in healthcare. We'll be talking about what systems are themselves so that we can really understand them, and a few other things. The last thing we'll be talking about is a really well constructed model for how we apply systems thinking in healthcare, and hopefully it'll help us understand how problems arise and how we can deal with them. So the first principle, it's kind of a guiding principle, but it is a mantra, a saying that we'll come back to repeatedly throughout the material today. Any system is perfectly designed to produce the output that it produces. So we have to kind of think about that. We have to reason through it and understand what we're really saying here. When things happen, they were intended to happen that way based on the way that the systems are designed. So when errors happen, it is because the system allows errors to happen in the design of the system. It doesn't mean that people don't make mistakes, but systems are designed in theory to minimize the impact of mistakes, provide second chances, second looks for things, backups, things like that. So any output from a system is what that system was designed to produce. One of the key parts there, though, is whether that was planned / intended or not. So there's another saying that I think is applicable here whenever if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's kind of a similar idea that you manifest the things that happen. So a system, no matter what it is designed to produce the things that it produces, whether we want them to do that or not. We just have to decide whether we're going to understand the system. The challenges, though, one of the bigger challenges there is that a lot of our systems are not easy to see. So when we're talking about dealing with patients, you all are in your IPPs now. I like to call, we're at the output side of a system. Although we are part of it, we are kind of an adjudicating force. So like the patient comes in, they present their prescription card, we run it, we don't find that they have coverage, we give them that information. We're all part of the system, right? We feel like we're an output side. We kind of get that mentality around it, but the system was designed to produce that particular output. So whether it was poor communication on the part of the third party to their patient, poor understanding of the patient, of their insurance coverage, lack of time, all those types of things, those are inputs, outputs, and throughputs of a system. So like I said, systems exist all around us in the world, whether we choose to understand them or not. A lot of the concepts here come from two books that I read and really pulled a lot from. One of them is like a textbook type thing, and the other one is more of a explainer book. But they are here on the screen if you're interested in this further. All right, so what are our major challenges with systems thinking? Well, we like to think that we have all the solutions ourselves. I can't imagine you advertise or you're like trying to sell your services to someone and you say like, I don't have any of the answers for you. I can't do anything for you. Come to me. That's kind of what it ends up being in a lot of cases because we really don't have all the answers, but it's really hard to sell that. So a lot of the thinking, kind of the zeitgeist, if you want to view it that way, is around selling something that is an idea or a concept and not an actual solution. So we got pride, we got politics. Politics is, it's got a bad reputation, but really politics is competition over scarce resources. That's like economics in general. Politics is very similar to that. Everyone, including us as healthcare providers, professionals, want simple answers. We want to know that's the drug to use, that's the drug not to use. We want black and white things when the world is rarely like that. Another challenge is our incentive structures and our payment models. So if we think about it, when you come in, or say you, but when someone comes in, let's say that you're a pharmacist, you're working, someone comes in and they want consultation on something. Our models are, our model as pharmacists, we sell products, right? If we were to counsel a patient and tell them they don't need a product, we don't get paid for our services. That is the way it is. So our incentive structures are kind of misaligned there. We are incentivized, not outside of our minds, right? We think we're doing the right thing, but our incentive structures are where the money lies and where the actual resources lie. Our incentives are to sell product, whatever it is, because that's how we get paid. Providers are no different. So you might have talked about DRG billing, which is diagnosis related group, or ICD-10 billing. They are designed to get a diagnosis. So when you go into a provider, it doesn't matter how long they spend with you, they need a diagnosis code because that's how they get paid. So what they're doing is looking for things that fit into a diagnosis code or that fit into a DRG so that they can get paid. Does that solve the problem? Maybe. It perhaps might solve a problem if the problem is simple. If the problem is complicated, odds are it won't. Odds are it'll be something, but it won't necessarily be the solution. And then the last part, our brains are constantly trying to trick us. We're going to talk about that several times throughout the quarter. I'm going to do a whole thing on cognitive biases. Our brains are just out there trying to trick us. It's not bad in the sense that the brain is not trying to harm us. It is trying to actually help us by making things simpler, except for that the reality is they aren't that simple. And again, any system is perfectly designed to produce the output that it produces. So first off, what is a system? A system is a collection of interconnected elements that are organized to accomplish a goal or serve a purpose. So those are three components: elements, connections, and goals or purpose. So in the example just of the human body, you all took physiology, so talked about the digestive system. So the digestive system has elements. You have your teeth, your stomach, those enzymes, your intestines, the parts of the body. That's the stuff, the system, or the elements of the system. The interconnections are how those elements interact. So when food moves from one part to another, the physical flow, you have chemical signaling, comes back and tells the brain to not eat anymore because there's already food in the stomach, that type of thing. That's a connection between the elements. So that's an interconnection. And then what's the purpose? Breaking down the food for energy. We like to think about that. I'm eating this for energy. Well, our brains have a lot of different reasons why we eat, but it's a part of that entire system. So those are the three parts of the system. So let's then talk about what is a system and what is not a system, because there are systems everywhere, but certain things are maybe a system, but not everything. So elements are affected by being in the system, and they are changed if they leave the system. So for example, teeth. Your teeth are part of that system. They serve a purpose, right? You take them out of the body. Now, of course, that's kind of weird, but let's just say it's a set of dentures. Is that a system? Is that part of a system? No, it's just a thing, right? It's a thing that is an element, but it really isn't a part of a system anymore. But when your teeth are in the system, they can be affected by it. So like you don't eat the right foods, your teeth break down. That's being affected by being in the system. And they are different when they leave the system. So systems in general bring elements together to do something of interest, typically a desired thing. One of the challenges, though, is that systems are mostly appreciated from outside the system. Did you all watch The Magic School Bus, or is that way past? Okay, because that was like when I was growing up. Kind of a good example. So they did a lot with like body systems. Where they would go through, they're in the intestine, or they're in the mouth, or they're in the stomach, or whatever. So if you were that Magic School Bus, you can't really appreciate the beginning of the system and the end of the system. You can't, because you're just in it. And that is one of the challenges when we think about dealing with patients. I think maybe pharmacists are more likely to get this, just get it conceptually, is that we have to really always think about the larger system that we're a part of, because it's not natural to us, because we're kind of on the outside of a lot of things. So we kind of have to make ourselves think about the system. It'd be different if like we're in a hospital and we're seeing all the systems around us all the time. Sometimes it can be kind of isolating to be outside of it, but we are still a part of it. So I think that does give us a little bit of appreciation for it. We can kind of admire almost externally the system. I don't like that analogy fully because it implies we are fully outside of it, but I think it just maybe is a little more natural to pharmacists. And I mentioned before, an element can be a component of multiple systems simultaneously. So like your bones are part, like your teeth are part of your skeletal system. In addition, being part of the digestive system, they do different things in those systems. One of the another characteristic, the systems are nonlinear, unpredictable, and resistant to change. So remember the concept in physiology of homeostasis. I think that applies here. The system is trying to get the output that it's getting. And so generally systems are resistant to change. Those systems try to get back to whatever the center is. That's a physiologic kind of natural principle, as well as the way we design systems ourselves. Another caveat to that is sometimes obvious solutions can worsen a problem. Great example, you need to clean your teeth. Scrub, 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 scrub. Keep scrubbing real hard, you're gonna get gum disease. That's you've been to the dentist and they're like, you're brushing your teeth too hard. How is that possible? I wanna get them clean. That's because systems themselves can actually, it might be an obvious solution to clean your teeth, except for that it can cause too much damage and it can actually harm the teeth because you can damage the gum line. So then I mentioned what is not a system. Well, there are some things that are just jumbles of unorganized, unrelated components. The example would be like sand that's scattered on the road by wind. That seems like it's moving, it's stuff, it may seem like it has purpose, but it's not designed to do anything. Now that sand may be part of some other system, like a geologic system, but that's that whole, what is the system right in front of us and whether the thing in front of us is a system. Another kind of note there is an organism that dies loses its systemness because it's not doing anything anymore. So you I mentioned taking the teeth out of the person, that is an element then, but it isn't doing anything in a system anymore. So if that organism, you have a animal that gets run over on the road, a deer or something like that, the animal dies, that animal is no longer a system. Now it actually can become a part of a different system, right? Because fungi can start to break it down, it becomes part of like a recycling type of system, but then that's an actual different system. So that system that was existing there becomes an element in another system. All right, so I've got some examples. You saw this in the notes already. Is this a system? Now, Georgia won this past weekend. I don't know if anyone's an Ole Miss fan. It was a very exciting game. We did not play until the fourth quarter, but you'll see I have a lot of these examples scattered throughout my lecture. So is this a system? I think I'm teeing it up that it is. So is it? Well, what do we have to have? We have to have elements. So what are our elements? We've got a helmet, we've got uniform, yard lines, player, grass and turf, gloves, football, that type of thing. What are our interconnections? We've got the rules. So the sidelines of themselves are a thing, but that we can't go out of them with the ball, that's a rule. So that's an interconnection between the elements. We have the talk among teammates. The teammates are, saying whatever they need to say to each other to get a play off. The head coach coordination with the play calling booth through his headset, signaling to players on field, that type of thing. This is a very specific photo, by the way. We have not worn red pants very much. We've only worn them a few times since the 1980s. So this was the Georgia-Florida game about 6 or 7 years ago. We tried out new uniforms. We did not win. And when that happens, we don't ever do it again. So this is the purpose. So what is the purpose? To win championships. So I hope that example kind of walks through what is a system and how, each of these elements, an example here, this trophy is an element, but it's part of the system, right? It's actually, in that case, part of what your purpose is. All right, so conceptually, we have two really big schools of thinking in this area. The first one is what we would call traditional thinking or linear thinking. It's the easy thought. It's what our brains try to route us to. A causes B causes C. That's the logical thing that we love. We love a good, think about like watching Law and Order or something like that. You're like, yeah, that guy did it. Or in a movie where, they're trying to set up who the villain is. Yeah, that's easy. So that's what our brains really want us to do. However, the real world isn't like that. The real world is complicated. The real world is a bunch of gray areas that are overlapping, and there's a lot of nuance that's present. So these are two ways of thinking that are constantly in what we might call tension. So we are fighting our brains. I mentioned before that our brains are trying to simplify things. So that's teeing up cognitive biases a little bit later on that we'll go into in a lot more detail. But we want to create simple cause and effect relationships. Honestly, this happens multiple, probably hundreds of times per day for us. We want to say like, okay, you see someone walking along on the street and they run out in front of traffic. They're just an idiot. That's a simple A to B to C thing. That is like, they are not smart because they ran out in front of traffic. Now, when you go do that, oh, I didn't know that. Are you an idiot? No, but you might think you were. But you realize then it's more complicated than what you thought because you were just distracted or there was something else going on. And so that's kind of the idea, just juxtaposing those two things. Our brains are constantly trying to simplify and make things as black and white as possible, when in reality, especially when we're in them, things are a lot more complicated. We can really see the differences and the nuances. So the variables that are present in our lives just really have these complex, multi-directional relationships. All right, so again, why is this so challenging in healthcare? Why am I making this? Why is this a topic? This seems really like philosophy. It's because it really helps us to understand errors. And our training, so our training, we talked about law last quarter. You all had a class on that. Dr. Ehringer talked about it last week. Our training reinforces that licensee, so in the case of pharmacists, personal responsibility for patients. So then that kind of runs counter to what I just said. That kind of runs like, well, here's what the pharmacist is responsible for. There's not a lot in there about the systems component. So when you are the pharmacist on duty at a pharmacy, you're the one who's accountable for everything that goes out the door. Do you look at everything in detail that goes out the door? You can't. When I fill in, at CVS, I'm dispensing a prescription that I didn't fill. Like you're part of a system, right? Technically, you're accountable for that. You're accountable for anything that goes out the door when you're there, or that comes in, or that happens when you're there. But you're not always the one doing it. So that is kind of almost contradictory in the way that our thought process is around it. It would be very hard for the Board of Pharmacy to talk about systems because systems don't fit nicely on a sheet of paper. They don't fit nicely in a law book. The dictum, or kind of the principle of do no harm, again, if you think about where healthcare comes from, it's the idea that the surgeon, the physician's accountable for the outcomes of that one patient. So we're the pharmacists, we're accountable for the outcomes of that one patient. That is a individual approach as opposed to a systems approach. And it can really be discouraging at times. So if we go in, we've got a person who needs to get a prescription filled, the prescription costs them, $2,500, they're in the donut hole on Medicare Part D or whatever. We want them to get the medicine, but we can't give them the money for it so that they can pay for it. So we feel bad about that, right? We're the ones who are keeping them from doing that, when in reality, we're part of the system. And so that can become very challenging for us. It's again, what's called a tension, where you have this individual accountability, responsibility, personal to the patient, yet you have the impact of all of these systems that are around, in, through, above, and below. And again, what's challenging there, the systems are not always readily visible or apparent. Example, I go in, I've got Miss Jones, she comes up, she brings her prescription card. I don't know what her insurance covers. I have absolutely no clue what her insurance covers. It would almost be impossible for me to find out all the things that her insurance covers versus doesn't cover. So the person who's right behind her in line is the same thing, and they have entirely different coverage. So that is a very challenging thing, because those are all different systems that I'm expected to be accountable for the product of, when all of the things that are lined up for it don't support that idea. Because what the patient may perceive is that you're not letting them get the prescription. I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times. That is the way that linear thinking works, because you are the one who can't hand it to them, right? They have insurance. Why? It's because there's lots and lots of systems involved in getting that prescription paid for by a third party. All right, so here's just another healthcare example here. The problem that's identified is a patient doesn't regularly use their maintenance inhaler to control COPD. So that's not an uncommon thing. It's just something maybe you're identifying it because you realize the patient hasn't picked it up in a while. So linear thinking would be, well, obviously they just don't know how to use it, because that's a easy thing that I can fix. That's something quick. That is, oh, well, let me just teach you how to use it really quick. The problem is that may not be the reason why they're not using it regularly. We don't know. Have you all talked about motivational interviewing yet? You will, and it's a big thing. Motivational interviewing is kind of baked into smoking cessation as a kind of a concept. It really brings the patient into it, like why are they wanting to do something? What's the motivation for it? What's the thing that's driving them? So if we think about that just as a concept, let's apply systems thinking to it. So elements, interconnections, and purpose. Does the patient have the inhaler and materials in their possession? That's an element. So if I knew how to use it, but I couldn't get it covered by my insurance, that's an element component, right? So we could work on that. Interconnections. Do they know how to use it? And does it fit into their normal patterns and habits? Is it something that they remember to use, right? Because that's an interconnection. That's I have to have a trigger to remember to use it. I know how, I've got it, I just need to get that connection that's present there. And then last part, purpose. Does the patient understand and buy in to why using the inhaler is important? Does it align with their goals? So we talk about that sometimes with patients. Do you want to get better? That's your purpose. The way you get better is you use this inhaler and you know how to use it and you get it and it fits into your life. So that's reflective of a systems idea. So think about that when you all come back around a motivational interview and think about how can this really help me? It again is not easy, and it isn't a checkbox. It isn't they just need it. Just dispense it to them, and it's covered, we're good. If they don't understand why it's used, if they don't know how to use it, if it doesn't fit into their lives, then that's just as good as them not having it. So really taking that systems approach can be very helpful there. All right, so I mentioned wicked problems. Kind of think about the movie Wicked here. But it's not quite that. So wicked problems were first identified and named as such back in 1967. So this is not a new concept. What at the core of what a wicked problem is the difference between the way we think the world works and the way it actually works. Sometimes the way it actually works is unknown, meaning that it's either impossible to quantify, impossible to put into a two-dimensional term, or very difficult to do that. So, and those aren't always the same thing. Something can be changing while it's happening. So a good example is like climate change. So that is something that it has been characterized. There's lots of books about it, but it isn't one thing. It's a lot of things. And so that is very difficult. And I call two-dimensional like a sheet of paper. Like if I can write it down on a sheet of paper, to me that's two-dimensional. But a third dimension would be like depth, and a fourth dimension would be time. So when you add in all of those components, particularly if something is moving at the same time, kind of like the climate of our world, that's very difficult to put on paper. So the definition that was put forward in 1967, and the authors wrote a clarification in 1973, is that class of social system problems which are ill-formulated, where the information is confusing, where there are many clients and decision makers with conflicting values, and where the ramifications in the whole system are thoroughly confusing. That's a lot of words. We're going to break it down though. So when we're thinking about what is a wicked problem versus what's not a wicked problem, let's make the first distinction whether or not it's actually almost or maybe might be wicked, but it's just very difficult. All right. So challenges or problems that require a lot of information and resources, but can be overcome within a finite period of time, would not be a wicked problem. Now I'm going to be controversial here, and I'm going to say traffic is not a wicked problem. It is a very difficult problem, but it is not a wicked problem. Why? Because with enough time and enough resources, the problem can be addressed. Now, does the problem change over time? Certainly. But again, one of the challenges with traffic is that our solutions take a long time. And so by the time think about like you're widening a road. By the time you widen the road, there's more development that's happened that would need the road to be widened even more. That doesn't mean that the problem was bad or that the solution was poor. It just means that sometimes the problem, because of the time it takes to solve it, can be delayed. So that's a distinction there. Asking ourselves the question, if we gather additional information, if we redefine the issues more precisely. So in the example of traffic, if we say, wait a minute, people are trying to get from point A to point B. Is there a better way to do this? That's, again, a difficult but ordinary problem. And then chunking the problem into smaller pieces if all of those works. If all of those work. So the 10 characteristics of wicked problems. There's no definitive formulation or structure. They have no stopping rule. So an example would be if in the traffic example, if we are trying to achieve a certain amount of cars per day that go over a bridge or something like that, and that's what we're trying to achieve. That's a stopping rule. Did that happen? Did it not happen? It's actually one of the things, I don't know how many of you have been in Louisville for a while, but when they first built the bridges downtown, it was called the Ohio River Bridges Project. It's kind of a big deal. It's about 10 years ago or so they started it, or ended it almost 10 years ago, but started it probably 15 years ago, that they were looking for improvement in the number of cars that were crossing the bridges at a certain time. Actually, what happened, incidentally, is that the traffic did not appear the way that they thought it would. So the bridges are underutilized compared to what they could have been used or what they were projecting. Kind of an example of something. There is a stopping rule for that. There is a point at which you could determine if what you did was effective or ineffective. So solutions to wicked problems are not true or false. They're not good they are not right or wrong. They are viewed as good or viewed as bad. Now, what's the difference there? Emotions. So if emotions are involved in whether the solution that's proposed to whatever you're trying to characterize is beneficial. So that's when you talk about fighting over scarce resources. I think it's good, you think it's bad. That's not a great situation to be in because I'm never going to make everyone happy. That's when you start to think, gosh, this is not a normal problem. This is not an ordinary problem. There's no immediate or ultimate test of a solution. So I think the classic example of wicked problems would be things like poverty, homelessness. I mentioned climate change, things like that. There isn't a way to know whether or not those things are fixed. It's very difficult to know whether or not those things are fixed. Another characteristic is that every solution is a one-shot operation. So it's one of the characteristics that's the most challenging of wicked problems is that when we try to address them, oftentimes we're doing it really wrong. So I think it doesn't mean that it's bad. Let's take healthcare, for example. So healthcare is kind of a classic wicked problem where we're fighting over scarce resources when so if you think about like, oh, I want this type of healthcare system, you are promising the resources of another person. They have to still be motivated to do the thing you want them to do. So that could be viewed as bad on the part of the person you're wanting to provide a service. Like if you wanted to have, all pharmacists make $50,000 a year and that's it. That's going to be challenging to motivate people to do that thing. Even though that would be very helpful. We'd have a lot of pharmacists. We get, probably a lot more drugs and medications to patients and that type of thing. But it's very challenging to actually put that into place. No complete list of potential solutions can be made. Each one of the problems themselves is unique and has its own characteristics. Each one is actually likely a symptom of another problem. So think about the connection between healthcare disparities, poverty, homelessness, those types of things. Each one might even be considered a symptom of another one. There's always a discrepancy in how the problem is described. That's a big clue. When someone talks about things, they talk about them differently based on how they view the problem. And then those who try to solve the problems are not absolved from responsibility or repercussions from their actions. So healthcare is an example. So how many times has society tried to address healthcare? Numerous. Tons of ways. Different strategies over time. Even what we have right now in the U.S. is the healthcare insurance system. You probably talked about it. If you didn't, you probably will at some point. Why we developed things, something called insurance over time. That is an attempt to try to address the problems that are faced. But each one of those attempts has its own challenges and problems that went along with it. All right, so I mentioned some of these before: poverty, obesity, climate change, immigration. Now this is the greatest hits, right? We see on the board here, these are all the things that people argue about all the time. Now, what politician trying to run for office is going to get up there and say, hey, vote for me, I don't have any solutions for any of these problems. You think poverty is a problem? I don't care. I don't know how to fix it, and I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to fix it. Yeah, vote for that guy, right? He's right, because anything that anyone tries to do for any of these problems is probably not going to fix it. It's just not going to. Why? Because they're wicked problems. And it is unpopular to say, and of course politician would never say what I just said. But that's really what they mean, because when everyone who promises something gets into office, it doesn't matter who they are. They cannot do the thing that they promised. Even if they did something, they can't do the thing that they promised because they're actually wicked problems. Yeah. That's a good, so the question was, is politics itself a wicked problem? Politics is an attempt to solve wicked problems that has its own flaws with it. Yeah, it is. I mean, it really is. Politics is fighting over scarce resources, competition for resources. So why is this important? Well, for exactly why I just said. Wicked problems, once you identify that a problem is indeed wicked, you then have a mindset. You develop a mindset about that problem that could be very helpful for you. Wicked problems are called that because the things that you would do to try to address them have their own flaws, problems, repercussions, issues. So once you identify that you're dealing with a wicked problem, you understand you have to put yourself in the mindset that this is not solvable. All of the things that we just talked about as characteristics. That is then a way to help you set expectations. So setting a kind of like a baseline, what is actually going to happen regarding this? Now again, is it popular? No, because why? People like to be told that things are going to be fixed. Think about it. People have such amnesia about stuff. They're like, every time there is a thing that happens, oh, they're going to fix everything. And they get in and no one fixes anything because the problems they're dealing with are wicked. And then the next time there's another cycle, same thing happens because we don't want to embrace the fact that these are wicked problems and that they probably won't ever be solved because they can't be solved. That's just not a popular thing to happen. So there's my little dog there, having no idea what they're doing. So for the sake of time, I won't have you watch this video with us, but this is a really interesting case study. It's from the World Health Organization. The name of it is Parachuting Cats into Borneo. So it's like 4 or 5 minutes, but it just goes through how everything that you try to do in the world addressing a problem has a thing that happens, and then another thing that happens, and then another thing that happens, and then you might be back at square one, or you might have a completely different problem that happens. So think about, it's just really simple. If I'm trying to solve, let's say there's a financial crisis, and I throw a bunch of money into the economy, which is what a central bank does by lowering what's called the discount rate to, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, the interest rate, which is the baseline, the discount rate that the Federal Reserve has dropped to I
want to ask about the wicked problems.
Yeah.
What's the difference between wicked problems and systems working as intended with their output?
Okay, so two different things. There are two different concepts. So start off right there. The question is, what's the difference between systems thinking and how they work, and then defining wicked problems? Is that what you're asking?
No, like how the system works as intended.
I see what you're saying.
Output you get, and these wicked problems exist seemingly we can't solve them. Right.
Okay, so systems thinking is an approach. It helps us because we can then understand when we are dealing with wicked problems that there are systems involved in that. They are different concepts, though. So the idea of a wicked problem is really just trying to figure out what's in front of us. Systems thinking is a mindset. It can be applied to a lot of different things. It can be applied to difficult but ordinary problems also. Yeah. So in the examples that I gave, healthcare is a good example. So if I were to say, my problem is too much government spending, okay? I cut healthcare because healthcare is a huge component of government spending. I create a larger problem down the road because I have more people seeking emergency care, and I have more people perhaps getting heart attacks, strokes, that type of thing that I have to pay for, right? Because of that. So that's like a systems, like where is the input into the system, what's the throughput, and where's the output component to it? And I was trying to address a wicked problem. So all those characteristics are still present. Yeah. But if I just think, okay, A, B to C, I need to cut government spending. I cut government spending on healthcare, actually end up spending more money on healthcare down the road. That's the problem with it, because I didn't really understand it. And I didn't certainly understand that it was part of a larger system. So I don't know if that makes sense. They're not exactly the same. They're just, yeah. Okay. I like the cats airdropping into Borneo example because it's really kind of misidentifying a wicked problem, because what they thought they could do is just do one thing and have one effect, and that was the end of the day. We know nature isn't like that. We know that there's consequences for pretty much everything we do. We build a house, we take away like marshland, we build a house, we don't have the floodplain anymore for water to go. So that's what happens. Like cities like Houston, for example, that are a lot of concrete, they get flooding like crazy because the water does not have anywhere to go once it falls from the sky. All right, so the last part here is applying systems thinking to healthcare quality improvement. So this is from an article back in 2019. I liked this because it broke it up into kind of 6 components that would help us with each section of what we deal with on a daily basis in healthcare. So this is by an author named McNabb. There was one foundational component and 5 principles that were on top of that are how we apply systems thinking in healthcare. One of the other interesting components is that this was developed as a model by an interprofessional team out of the UK that involved pharmacists. We don't really see a lot of pharmacists involved in things like this, particularly from an organizational practices standpoint. We tend to be product oriented, which isn't bad. It's where we came from, especially safety related things that we don't tend to be involved in the process side of it as much as we are in the product side of it. So this is good that pharmacists were involved in this. All right, so the first foundational concept is most problems belong to the system, not the individual. It doesn't mean that there aren't things that individuals do to either make them worse, better, address them. You're still part of systems, but a lot of the problems, arguably most of the problems that we deal with, are system problems, not individual problems. The example I gave you of like this person can't afford their medicine. Gosh, it feels like a personal problem. It feels like you're doing something bad. It feels like I have the drug here and I can't give it to them. You know, you kind of want to, that's a system problem though. If you take a step back and realize that it isn't the individual that owns that problem, although it feels like that. It's a system problem. The second, or that was the foundational principle. It kind of overrides everything else, but we'll say that it built, others are built off of it. The first one is seek multiple perspectives. So the people that are on the ground or the people that are doing the work are the local experts. Why is this important? When you are trying to tackle a problem, talk to people. You are dealing with the patient brings you an issue. If you just esoterically address what's happening with them without talking to them, why is it that things are happening? Asking questions, seeking their perspective. You're not understanding that they're the experts in what they do. So from a system standpoint, if I'm talking to my technicians, if I'm a pharmacist, or if I'm a leader, like a district leader talking to my pharmacist about some kind of practice, hey, what's going on over there? Talk to me. Instead of just projecting what you think should happen, seeking those perspectives, understanding that people are the experts on the ground at what they do. Whether they do it right is a different thing, which is an execution thing, but understanding that their perspective is valuable. Considering work conditions, acknowledging the interplay of demand, capacity, and resources. All right. This is an important one because we don't always, well, I think we probably do actually do this more than what other parts of the healthcare system do. And it's probably because of our connection to product. Like if I can't, one of my jokes or one of my sayings has always been like, I can tell you if I can like, hey, this person needs this antibiotic, great. If I can't go get it, it doesn't matter because you could come up with the same information that I could come up with. And if both of us don't have it, it doesn't matter. Like that, And I've done that before where I've been counseling people and like I walk out in the aisle, I'm like, oh, you need, where's Delsum? You need Delsum. You do not have Delsum. Okay. Go somewhere else and get Delsum because you need Delsum. Like that's, so I kind of feel helpless without that. The idea that we are limited, we have constraints. We can't make, why are you out of that? Listen, if I could make it, I would make it and I would give it to you because I don't make any money unless I sell you something. We have to understand that there are limitations on the systems that are around us. Demand, capacity, and resources. And I have slides devoted to each of these that provide a little bit more detail. This is kind of the broader view. The third component above so it's the fourth one overall, but the third component is analyzing interactions and flow. So there are elements, interconnections, and purposes in all of the systems that we have. But we have to understand that moving something around, so for example, if you're doing a technician schedule at a store, has anyone ever done that? A schedule for resources? Okay. The way that scheduling works is typically you have a budget for hours for technicians. I'm going to just be selfish here and say that when I work part-time for CVS on the weekends, I go in and I pray that there's a technician with me. Sometimes there's not. But they have a certain number of hours per week that they're allotted. And they have to decide to budget them wherever they have to decide to budget them. If they move them from one place to another, they are actually robbing, right? They're actually stealing, not really, but they're moving. You can't have it in both places always. You have a finite amount of resources. So there is an impact when you do that. So let's say that you moved a technician from Monday afternoon to Saturday when I was working. That Monday afternoon might be harder because they're going to be down one person, and the Saturday might be easier. But there's an impact of that choice on another area. The next to last one is understanding why decisions make sense. Kind of a downstream effect of that people are experts thing. You have to start out with the idea, and this is general advice, this is not just systems thinking, the idea that people acted in what they thought was the best way that they thought to do it with the information that they had. If you start out from that perspective, this is a big deal in like accident investigation for aircraft and things like that when something happens. Why would the pilot have thought this? Why would they think that was the right thing to do? If you start out from there, you will get way further in terms of addressing any problems that are present. Because if people, well, why did they do that? Side story, growing up, my dad, when I would do stupid stuff, like I lost my wallet a lot because I had ADHD and I didn't know it. I'd leave it somewhere. Why did you do that? I'd look at him like, are you out of your mind? I'm like 8 years old. I did not want to do that. Why are you asking me such a question? So it would make me upset. But that's kind of natural, right? Because we think, and if you kind of take that perspective and flip it on its side, when someone does something, they meant to do it, right? On the other hand, when people do make decisions, typically, generally, they did not want to do the wrong thing. Generally, right? If they did, that's a different story, but they generally did not want to do the right thing. I like sports examples. A play call by a coach is the best call in the world if it what? If it worked. So a couple of years ago, anyone here an Alabama fan or a Texas A&M fan or anything like that? So Alabama played Texas A&M. This is, I think, no, not Texas A&M, LSU. Alabama and LSU, because it's the first year Brian Kelly was the head coach, and they were very close. It was like almost tied at the end. Texas A&M scored a touchdown. They were down by 1. They could have kicked the point after to tie it. They decided to go for 2 to win. It worked. They won the game. If it had not have worked, it'd be a very different story. So you're the smartest person in the world if things work, and you're the dumbest person in the world if they don't work. That's called hindsight bias, and it is very common. And if things work as intended when people make decisions, it was the best decision ever. If they don't, then it's the worst decision ever. But that is hindsight bias, and that's a problem. All right, the last one is exploring performance variability. So this is when we look at systems and we say, okay, I've got this procedure. So the nurse, let's say a hospital, the nurse is supposed to go from the, their their computer to the med bin and then back and then to the room. Why do they skip going back by their cart? That's the difference between work as imagined, which is the protocols, your standard operating procedures or SOPs, and then the work as actually done. This is where, have you all heard about workarounds? So this is a big technology thing at CVS. Anyone here work for CVS, by the way? Okay, so this is just what I know. So the pharmacists at CVS have something called the N key for their queues, and it's when you hit N, it's supposed to go to the next thing the system wants you to do. All right. They look at percentage of N key utilization as a part of your workflow. I hate the N key. I'm going to cut that part out of the recording. But it is the definition for me of the difference in work as imagined and work as done, because the N key doesn't help me in all situations. It does when I'm just normally operating. But if I need to find a particular person or find a patient because they're right in front of me, N key does not do me any good. It doesn't do me anything. I got to do 10 keys to get out of the N key. That whole workflow. It's nuts. I wish there was just a mode that I could click to get out of that and then get back into it when I need it. It's helpful. Sometimes I like it when it triages things for me. Other times I think I need to find this person. And so that is a difference between the work is imagined and the work is done. That's the type of feedback that's very helpful. I regularly put in feedback on the portals and things like that to try to provide boots on the ground information to the systems teams. I mentioned before that I had a slide devoted to each one of those concepts, so I won't read these to you. This is just reiterating what I said. So the seek multiple perspectives, considering work conditions, analyzing interactions and workflow, understanding why decisions make sense at the time. I will put here a plug. Later on, actually multiple times, we'll be talking about culture and what culture means. And in healthcare, there's something called a just culture. That is a very important concept that stemmed from that Institute of Medicine report, To Err is Human. The idea that what it means is that everyone makes mistakes. Like what was that? There used to be a Sesame Street show. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. If you think you don't make mistakes, that's a bad culture. If there are no mistakes that are reported, that's a bad culture because everyone makes mistakes. So what a just culture does is it does not seek initially to punish individuals for things that happen. It seeks to understand things that happen, both from an individual standpoint, if that is important, and from a system standpoint. For example, in the first week we talked about like an allergy. So when someone has a medication allergy, let's say again that the hospital, so they're getting transferred from outside hospital, the allergy information is buried in like a stack of notes about this thick, and let's say it's at the very bottom of it. It's not on a wristband. It's not like part of the verbal report, and they're allergic to something really big like penicillin, and it causes anaphylaxis. And I don't know that. Now the information's there, but I don't know it at the time. So if they were going back, right? So let's say that the person got penicillin, they had a reaction to it, maybe they even died, maybe it was that bad. That's a very difficult situation because it seems like they should have known, but should they have known? Was it something that was going to reasonably, from reasonable person perspective, that they could have known that at the time? That's very tough, right? So the idea of understanding where the problem came from is a just culture. Because if you really dug into that, on the surface, you could have said, oh, they should have known. It was in the notes. Okay, go live through it. See if that is actually the way that things work in the real world. Come back. That's how this whole process works. It's a really good idea to wrap our brains around. I already mentioned the understanding work is done versus work is imagined. Ted Lasso fans in here? Love Ted Lasso. Great quote. Taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. And I would agree with that 100%. But what does that tell us? That tells us when we think things are really simple is when we have to check ourselves and say, they're not. Actually, I'm actually underthinking it in this situation because my brain wants me to do that. All right. Last part, how to use this information. When you ask yourself the question, am I making this too simple? Am I trying to apply too simple of a logic to it? Then that's where systems thinking could come in. And then the next question is, what are the components of the system? Another way to think about the interconnections is, where are my levers? You've heard that before, to say like, I've got a lever point. For me, as a department chair, I have a meeting every 2 weeks with the dean, and that's my lever. I got an opportunity to talk to the dean about something when I have that meeting with her. So that's, when I think about systems, that's one of the ways I think about it too. All right, questions? All right. Well, thank y'all. We'll see you next week.